In Ottawa, Edna Jakes embraces it with fear and with hope.
Thousands of people jammed the churches. I went to St. Andrew's and sat quietly with the rest of them, everyone praying, wiping the tears away, not saying a word. We all seemed one humanity, I guess you would call it, united in an overwhelming prayer that somehow peace would come.
D-Day is a triumph for Canadian soldiers. They advance farther than any other Allied force. It is triumph won in blood. During the first 6 days on French soil, almost 3,000 Canadians are killed or wounded. Near the town of Carpiquet, the North Shore's Reverend Raymond Hickey returns to a scene of battle.
You could fancy how the wheat field had been just like any of our wheat fields back home. But now the wheat was trampled into the earth. The ground was torn with shell holes, and everywhere you could see the pale, upturned faces of the dead. Carpiquet was a graveyard of the regiment.
Two months after D-Day, the Canadian and British forces have advanced only 20 miles. To the west, American troops break out. Hitler orders his 7th Army to pursue them. He has ordered them into a giant pocket. If Canadian troops can close off the eastern side, hundreds of thousands of German soldiers will be trapped. The pocket becomes a seething cauldron of death and desperation. German soldiers battle towards the opening and safety. "32-year-old Major David Curry and the South Alberta Regiment must stop them."
In the distance, we could see rising clouds of dust. The column stretched as far as we could see. It was an awe-inspiring sight and appeared to be a crushing force.
With only 175 men and 16 tanks, they kill, wound, or capture almost 3,000 Germans. Despite the Canadians' courage, they cannot close the gap. Also on the road is a young artillery captain from Quebec City. Pierre Sévigny is a liaison officer to the Polish Armored Division. They are out of ammunition and surrounded by German forces. At dawn, the enemy tanks attack. Only an artillery barrage from the Canadian lines can save them. Sévigny radios the Canadians and prepares to die.
The steel monsters were moving forward with all their guns firing. 500 meters. 300. 100. All of a sudden, the hurricane, the noise of thunder. The earth was quaking. Our guns were firing. We were saved.
Sévigny and Curry will be decorated for their valor. The Battle of Falaise is over. Charlie Martin will never forget its horror.
The sunken roads were littered every foot of the way with corpses and burned equipment. In the heat of August, it did not take long for the bloating to start. The stench made us sick.
During the summer of 1944, the Germans have lost 400,000 men. Of 20,000 Hitler youth who marched into Normandy, only 300 are left. The German army in Normandy has been decimated. At the farm in Little Britain, Everett Hill's sister Velma writes him.
Dear Everett, hiya kid, how goes it? Mother just phoned to say she had a letter from you saying that you were somewhere in France. I've been afraid of that for some time. Hope it will soon be all over so you can pick up Joan and beat it for Canada. I'll keep my fingers crossed for you.
On the same day, a mortar explodes near the town of Caen in Normandy. Everett Hill is killed instantly. He is just 23 years old. 6 weeks later, Everett Hill's child, a daughter, is born. More than 5,000 Canadians have died on the killing grounds of Normandy. Half of Charlie Martin's regiment is among them, but they have helped bring a Nazi army to ruin.
The cost had been hard for us, but at Falaise, the collapse seemed an awful testimony to a regime which lasted not 1,000 years, but barely 12. We had come to learn the full meaning of total war.
In September 1944, Canadian troops have reached Holland's Scheldt estuary. They are in their 4th month of fighting. The grim campaign through Northwest Europe is taking longer and costing the lives of many more Canadians than expected. At home, support is growing for conscription. But Prime Minister Mackenzie King fears it will divide the country. The Minister of National Defense, Colonel James Leighton Ralston, visits Europe to personally investigate reports that Canada is running out of soldiers. Casualties are rising. Units are under strength and exhausted. Ralston is shaken. He tells his aide-de-camp he has made a fateful decision.
He would either force the government to bring in overseas conscription, or he would resign. He had me draft a signal to send to the Prime Minister requesting the earliest possible meeting with the Cabinet. King will know what that means, he said quietly.
In Ottawa, King the Mystic has a prophetic dream. He will triumph in the coming battle.
This is going to be a trying experience for me. Indeed, Ralston has been a thorn in my flesh right along. However, I have stood firm before, and I shall do so again.
At Cabinet, Ralston's call for conscription finds support. King becomes convinced his own cabinet is plotting against him.
It is perfectly plain to me that in pretty much all particulars, my position is becoming identical to that of Sir Wilfrid Laurier's, where his supposedly strongest colleagues left him one by one and joined their political enemies and became a party for conscription.
But King has an ace up his sleeve. Retired General Andrew MacNaughton. The immensely popular MacNaughton assures King conscription is unnecessary. He is certain he can convince enough men to enlist voluntarily. King forces Ralston out and appoints General MacNaughton the new Minister of National Defense. But MacNaughton's rejection of conscription is considered a betrayal of his own men. When he tries to raise recruits near Ottawa, he is booed and pelted with debris. The effort is in a shambles. The country is on the verge of crisis. On the morning of November 22nd, Mackenzie King gets a telephone call that changes the course of Canadian history. It is MacNaughton. He tells King Canada's military commanders are refusing to continue the campaign for volunteers.
He said it was like a blow in the stomach. If the commanders began to resign, the whole military machine would run down, begin to disintegrate, and there would be no controlling the situation.
King realizes the Army's decision could be a fatal blow, but it may also be a way out. He calls an emergency cabinet meeting for later that day. Unbeknownst to King, 6 of his most powerful ministers, including C.D. Howe, have decided to break with the Prime Minister. At a secret meeting before Cabinet, Minister of Mines Thomas Crerar draws up the plan of action.
Our several resignations should go in at the same time. We were in a serious situation. The action we were contemplating might bring about the downfall of the government.
In the East Bloc, King is meeting with another member of Cabinet. King has changed his mind. He has decided to introduce conscription. But he must obtain the support of Justice Minister Louis Saint-Laurent. The eminent lawyer is Quebec's spokesman in Cabinet. King uses the threat of an army revolt to justify his reversal to Saint-Laurent.
I spoke of how impossible government, law, and order might become. He was very much perturbed. Saint-Laurent spoke of it as raising serious questions of relations of army with government. Very serious, if there was anything in the nature of a palace revolution.
King's fate rests in Saint-Laurent's hands. He decides to support King and conscription. King announces he will send 16,000 of the men trained for home defense to fight overseas. Some protest the decision, others desert. 2,400 of them reach the front line. By the time they get there, they are no longer really needed. The crisis has almost destroyed the government, but King and the country have survived. In Quebec, André Laurendeau expresses a grudging admiration.
He knew the trick of holding a vast, divided country together. Like a diligent tailor, each night he mended the wear and tear of every day. He sewed and darned and redarned so much and so well that the cloth more or less held together. If he had disappeared, a reign of violence would have followed.
The spring of 1945 brings freedom to the people of Europe. The Dutch embrace their Canadian liberators with overwhelming joy and gratitude. War's long agony is almost over. Of the 400 young men he signed up with 5 years earlier, Charlie Martin is one of only a handful still in active combat. But in Holland, he is raked with machine gun fire. Martin is carried to base hospital and surgery.
When he was working on my arm, I came to for a few seconds, looked down at what he was doing and said, "Don't take it off." The doctor shouted, "More ether." Then I passed out for good.
In early May, the North Shore's Father Ray Hickey is saying Mass in a ruined barn just inside Germany.
I could see a ray of hope in every face. Then someone rushed in and shouted, "The war's over. It's over." One fellow by me calmly said, "Well, I guess that's it. Eh, Father?" Most of the lads just stood there, watched me take off the vestments, then quietly walked away.
René Lévesque ends his war as the senior correspondent to the U.S. 7th Army. As Allied armies march through a vanquished Germany, they find unimagined evil. Lévesque is with the Americans when they liberate the Nazi death camp at Dachau.
I felt as if I were in another world. This was not a chance mishap, but the systematic death machine. A truly scientific industry of elimination. A hell fabricated with great care. We couldn't believe what we saw.
The Nazis have taken the lives of 6 million Jews. For the doomed Jews, the camp barracks where food, clothes, and valuables were kept represented life and salvation. In the camp at Auschwitz, they gave those barracks a name: Canada. Both were out of reach. During the war, only 450 Jews fleeing the Holocaust are given asylum in Canada. Three months after the defeat of Germany, the end of the Second World War is heralded with indescribable horror in Japan. On August 6th, the Americans dropped the world's first atomic bomb on Hiroshima. The war has scarred the world like no other and stolen the innocence from an entire generation. In the Yukon village of Carcross, Angela Sidney welcomes her son Peter home with an ancient Tlingit song about separation and safe return. But now he must find his way in a homeland that has forever changed in the wake of war. For thousands of young Canadians, it is time to come home and to hope for a better future. After 5 years in the Navy, Frank Curry is back on dry land, for good, in Winnipeg. He takes out his diary for the last time.
Quite a day in anyone's life to arrive back in one's hometown after a terrible war. All in one piece, a discharge around the corner and university ahead, with all the prospects of a very peaceful home life, to make life seem very, very wonderful. For some, coming home will mean distinguished careers.
In the military for Dieppe hero Dolar Menard. In business and politics for Pierre Sévigny. After years of war, Charlie Martin returns to Canada with both arms and a heart full of hope.
There was a whole new world to be faced by riflemen and hundreds of thousands of others. We had fought to preserve one world. Now in 1945, we faced another.
Joan Hill arrives from England at the farm in Little Britain in Ontario. She introduces 19-month-old Lynn Everett Hill to her grandparents, aunts, and uncles. Everett Ivan Hill's story does not end with the war. His wife and his daughter and his grandchildren would come to call Canada home.